In the early 1900s, airplanes were just beginning to take to the skies. Back then, there were relatively few airplanes and more than enough airspace to hold them all. However, as time passed, the number of aircraft sharing the same airspace grew. Today, air travel is commonplace. Airplanes have become bigger, sleeker, and faster. Over the years, the number and types of aircraft changed, but some basic things have remained the same. Now, more than ever, you as a pilot must abide by the rule of see and avoid to prevent a mid-air collision. The introduction of air traffic control, or ATC, and radar has helped to alleviate some of the congestion problems. But it is still the sole responsibility of each pilot to see and avoid. Although this may seem simple enough, learning to spot and avoid other aircraft isn't always easy. For example, there are 5 F-4 jet fighters in this picture. Can you spot them? As you progress in flying, your eyes will eventually become trained to pick out other air traffic. In fact, you should spend about 70% of your piloting time looking for other aircraft. This technique, called scanning, involves dividing your viewing into segmented areas of about 10 degrees each. Focusing on each section for about 1 second allows you to keep your eyes moving, yet still enables you to easily pick out traffic. If something does catch your attention, you should identify the object before moving on to the next section. Be sure to include the entire visual area in your scan, since conflicting traffic can come from any direction. However, blind spots caused by the design of the airplane can block part of your field of vision. These blind spots will vary from one aircraft to another, depending on the location of the wings and the cockpit. For example, in a high-wing aircraft, the area directly under the airplane is blocked by the fuselage, while the wings make it difficult to see the area above the airplane. When you make a turn in a high-wing airplane, your vision is blocked in the direction you are turning. Before starting a turn, you should raise the wings slightly to clear the area. Then make the turn. In a low-wing aircraft, the fuselage blocks your view under the airplane, as well as some of the area above and behind. The view downward is further restricted by the wings. When you make a turn in a low-wing aircraft, the view in the direction away from the turn is blocked. Therefore, before making any turns, whether you're in a high-wing or a low-wing airplane, you should always scan the entire area for possible traffic. This is especially true when you're near an airport. Also, during prolonged climbs in a high-wing or prolonged descents in a low-wing airplane, you should make shallow S-turns to increase your field of vision. As you're learning to fly, your instructor will have you do clearing turns before you begin any flight maneuver. These turns involve at least a 180-degree change in direction. The most common way to clear an area is to make 2 turns in opposite directions, each one being 90 degrees. If you do spot another aircraft, its relative position will help you determine if it presents a potential hazard to you. If the other plane appears to be at or near the horizon, then it's near your altitude. Even if the traffic isn't near the horizon, you should always keep it in sight until it has passed by, since the other pilot may decide to change altitudes. When an aircraft is on a collision course with you, its position in the windshield will barely move as it approaches. Because the plane doesn't appear to be moving, it probably won't catch your eye as easily. For this reason, it's important that you develop and use the proper scanning technique at all times. When you do find yourself near another aircraft, there are certain regulations which determine who has the right-of-way. These regulations not only determine the right-of-way for converging airplanes, but also state what types of aircraft have priority. For instance, balloons, gliders, airplanes towing gliders, and airships all have right-of-way over other powered aircraft. Any plane in a state of emergency has the right-of-way over all other aircraft. When two airplanes are approaching head-on, both should yield to the right. When you're overtaking another airplane, the plane in front has the right-of-way. In this case, you should alter your course and overtake the aircraft well to the right. If an airplane is converging on you from the right, it has the right-of-way. Just like two cars meeting at an intersection, you must yield to the vehicle on the right and change your course to pass behind the other aircraft. During airport operations, aircraft in the process of landing have the right-of-way over aircraft on the ground as well as others in the vicinity. If two aircraft are approaching to land, the one at the lowest altitude is given right-of-way. The biggest problem with the see and avoid concept is that if your aircraft isn't seen by other pilots, they won't be able to avoid you, even though you may have the right-of-way. You can help other pilots spot you on the ground by turning your landing lights on when you're taxiing on, across, or holding in position on any runway. In the air, turn on your landing lights when you're in the vicinity of an airport, both during the day and at night. In addition, your anti-collision lights should be on whenever the engine is running, except at times when their brightness could compromise safety. To further reduce the chance of mid-air accidents, cruising altitudes were established to keep sectors of traffic flowing in one direction, away from traffic moving in the opposite direction. These cruising altitudes apply to pilots flying under visual flight rules as well as those under instrument flying rules. Visual flight rules, or VFR, means flying and navigating primarily with the use of outside visual references. When weather conditions restrict outside vision, VFR flight is often not possible. IFR, or instrument flight rules, apply to specially trained pilots who hold instrument ratings and are flying aircraft equipped for instrument flight. The cruising altitudes start at 3,000 feet above the ground. VFR aircraft flying eastbound on magnetic courses between 360 degrees and 179 degrees would fly at odd 1,000 feet plus 500. Westbound aircraft fly at even 1,000 feet plus 500. IFR traffic flies at odd or even 1,000 feet depending on the direction of travel. There are also minimum safe altitudes you must adhere to in order to ensure that you have enough time to take the proper corrective action in the event of an emergency. When you're flying over uncongested areas, you must fly at least 500 feet above the surface. Over open water or sparsely populated areas, there is no minimum altitude. The only restriction here is that you cannot fly closer than 500 feet to any person, vessel, vehicle, or structure. However, regulations do say that you must always operate at an altitude which would allow you to make an emergency landing without causing undue hazard to persons or property on the ground. A larger safety margin is needed over congested areas such as towns or cities. Regulations require that you fly at least 1,000 feet higher than the top of the highest obstacle when you're within 2,000 feet of it. Large metropolitan areas pose a more serious problem because they have fewer emergency landing areas. By flying at higher altitudes than those required by regulation, you might be able to buy the extra time needed to tend to any problem which might occur. In addition, a higher altitude increases your glide distance, giving you a larger selection of emergency landing spots. Another important aspect of safety is avoiding areas protected for national security reasons. An inadvertent entry into such an area can result in your aircraft being intercepted. Careful pre-flight planning and vigilance in flight can help avoid most problems. In addition, studying the federal regulations and interception procedures outlined in the AIM prior to departure can help eliminate confusion and a potentially dangerous situation in flight. For example, an aircraft that is in front of you that is rocking its wings is indicating your flight has been intercepted. You must follow the intercepting aircraft. As the skies become more crowded, the skills of detecting other aircraft and avoiding potential hazards becomes increasingly important. Using these skills will help ensure enjoyable flying in the years to come.
By the time you've finished your training, the airport will feel like your second home. Depending on where you train, this might be a small grass strip, a large complex in a big metropolitan area, or one of the thousands of airports in between. It could be an airport without an operating tower, where you are responsible for determining the active runway and following local procedures. Or it could be at a controlled airport. When a control tower is operational, air traffic controllers will instruct you to follow certain procedures, depending on whether you're in the air or on the ground. To operate at a controlled airport, you must have two-way radio contact with ATC. Airports are the hub of all air operations. Not only is this where aircraft of various types take off and land, but this is also the place where aircraft are parked or hangared, and where you can rent, buy, or service aircraft. The larger airports can have several hundred operations per day. The logistics of moving this many aircraft over and around each other requires precise instructions and procedures. To relieve some of the problems associated with having so many aircraft operating in a concentrated area, the FAA has established some standards and procedures to help pilots better orient themselves around an airport. One example of this standardization is airport signs. There are 6 types of airport signs which provide you with information while taxiing. These signs are mandatory instruction, location, direction, destination, information, and runway distance remaining. First, mandatory instruction signs are used to denote an entrance to a runway or critical area, and to areas where aircraft are prohibited from entering. These signs have white lettering on a red background and usually indicate the holding position for these areas. There are 2 different types of location signs. The ones used to identify either a runway or taxiway have yellow lettering and a yellow border on a black background. Runway boundary and instrument landing system critical area boundary signs have black markings on a yellow background. Direction signs have the same black on yellow markings and contain arrows, which indicate the direction of taxiways leading from an intersection. Destination signs indicate the general direction to remote locations such as runways, terminals, military areas, civil aviation areas, and fixed base operators. Signs advising you of nice-to-know items are referred to as information signs. The runway distance remaining signs provide valuable information during takeoff or landing. These signs have a white number on a black background and are located along the side of the runway. The number indicates the distance remaining in thousands of feet. Now let's look at another example of standardization, runway markings. The basic VFR markings found on a hard-surfaced runway consist of white runway numbers and a center line. At each end of a runway is a set of numbers, painted so they appear upright to an approaching aircraft. These numbers represent the approximate magnetic direction of the runway, rounded to the nearest 10 degrees, with the last 0 omitted. In other words, if you were landing in a no crosswind condition on runway 29, your magnetic heading would be approximately 290 degrees during final approach. When landing on the same runway, but from the opposite direction, your final approach heading would be 110 degrees magnetic. This numbering of the runway to correspond to its magnetic direction can help you determine the runway's orientation long before you actually see the numbers. When two runways are built parallel to each other, both will carry the same numerical designation. However, the left runway number will have an L, while the right runway will have an R. Where three parallel runways exist, the letter C is added to the center runway designation. In addition to the center line, some runways used for IFR operations have additional markings, such as threshold markers, which consist of two sets of 4 parallel bars. Some runways have displaced thresholds, meaning the end of the runway is not suitable for landing. This usually is because of obstructions near the approach end, or the marked portion of the runway is not strong enough for repeated landings. You can identify these portions of the runway by arrows painted down the center, pointing toward a large white line that represents the actual runway threshold. You cannot land in a displaced threshold area, but it can be used for taxiing, takeoff, and landing rollout. Stopways or blast pads are marked with a chevron pattern. These areas are not to be used for landing, takeoff, and taxiing. All taxiway markings are in yellow and provide guidance between the parking areas and the runway. A broad yellow dashed line painted across a taxiway indicates a hold position at intersecting taxiways. Runway holding position markings consist of 4 yellow lines, 2 solid and 2 dashed. The solid lines are always on the side where the aircraft is to hold. These holding lines may also be used on runways that intersect another runway. At airports with an operating control tower, a clearance is required before crossing these lines onto an active runway. If you receive a hold short instruction, you must repeat that instruction back to the tower or ground controller. Any runway or taxiway that is marked with an X on each end is closed to all operations. During periods of limited visibility or at night, many airports are lighted to make operations safer. The amount of lighting varies greatly, depending on the size of the airport. Taxiways are outlined in blue lights or blue reflectors. Additional taxiway lighting may be used during periods of low visibility. For example, green taxiway centerline lights may be available at some airports. Yellow in-pavement clearance bar lights indicate the location of holding points at intersecting taxiways. They are designed to increase awareness of holding positions during periods of low visibility. Runway guard lights are elevated or in-pavement yellow flashing lights installed at runway holding positions. They indicate where a taxiway intersects a runway. Stop bar lights consist of a row of red in-pavement lights. They are designed to confirm an ATC clearance to enter or cross an active runway during periods of low visibility. Pilots should never cross an illuminated red stop bar. Runways are outlined by white lights. On runways used for instrument approaches, yellow lights are used as a visual caution zone on either the last 2,000 feet or half the runway length, whichever is less. Some larger airports have flush-mounted centerline lights as well. To mark the end of the runway, the portion of centerline lights between the last 3,000 and 1,000 feet are alternating red and white. The last 1,000 feet of lights are red. To mark the beginning of a runway, green lights are placed at the threshold. These same lights, when viewed from the opposite direction, will be red, indicating the end of the runway. Sometimes, white strobe lights accompany the threshold lights. Sequenced flashing lights can be seen on some instrument runways in the approach area along the extended center line. These lights can vary in intensity and are used to guide aircraft to the runway during instrument approaches. At some airports, you can turn the runway lights on or adjust their intensity by keying the microphone a specific number of times within a certain time period. At monitored or controlled airports, you can also have the approach and landing lights adjusted by asking the tower or flight service station to temporarily adjust the lighting for you. Another light you may see is the airport beacon. This beacon aids pilots in identifying the airport from several miles away and is operational from sunset to sunrise and in some cases during periods of IFR conditions. Civil airports for land planes display an alternating green and white flashing beacon. Beacons at military fields emit two white flashes alternating with a green flash. Lights located on obstructions, such as towers and tall buildings, can either be red or white, and sometimes may be flashing. These lights assist you in picking out obstacles that could be high enough to present a hazard. At some airports, visual glide slope indicators are installed to help pilots judge the proper descent to the runway. One type of system is the Visual Approach Slope Indicator Lights, or VASI. This system contains two separate bars of lights, which normally represent a 3-degree glide slope. When you're above the glide path, both indicators will be white. When you're below the 3-degree glide path, both will be red. When the lower or near bar of lights is indicating white and the second far bar is indicating red, your airplane is on the VASI glide path. Another type of glide slope information system is Pappy, or Precision Approach Path Indicator. Instead of comparing two bars of lights as with the VASI system, you compare lights on the same bar. When you're above the glide path, all 4 lights will indicate white. As your aircraft descends and nears the glide path, the lights on the right will begin to turn red. As the aircraft intercepts the proper glide path, the 2 indicators on the right will show red, while the 2 on the left remain white. When 3 or more lights show red, you are beneath the glide path and are too low. Another common aid at airports is a wind indicator. Since wind is an important factor in determining takeoff and landing performance, airports use 1 or more basic wind indicators. The most common type of wind indicator is the wind sock, which consists of a tube with one end bigger than the other. Wind blowing through the larger end causes the smaller end to streamline downwind. A more elaborate type of wind indicator is the wind T, which will weather vane into the wind. It represents an airplane pointed in the direction of takeoff or landing. When a wind T is co-located with another wind indicator, it may be manually aligned with the runway to indicate the direction of landing. Another landing direction indicator is the tetrahedron. Like the wind T, it may swing freely in the wind or may be manually positioned. When determining the landing direction using a tetrahedron, remember the small end points into the wind. Also, if the wind is calm, the tetrahedron may not be aligned with the designated calm wind runway. In this situation, use extreme caution. When installed at uncontrolled airports, the wind and landing direction indicators are usually placed in the middle of a segmented circle. The segmented circle helps identify the location of the wind direction indicator, and the extensions indicate the correct traffic pattern for each runway at the airport. Each year, hundreds of aircraft are destroyed or damaged by collisions with other aircraft or vehicles on the ground. The majority of these accidents are preventable. All pilots must be more vigilant and become aware of the dangers of runway incursions. Ground operations during low visibility and bad weather can challenge situational awareness. When operating at an airport, always be aware of other aircraft and vehicles moving around you. Also, be aware of situations that increase the likelihood of an incursion. A runway incursion can involve an aircraft vehicle, person, or object on the ground that creates a collision hazard. A misunderstood clearance can also result in a runway incursion or a potential collision. There are several procedures that you can follow and precautions that you can take to avoid a runway incursion. Complete as many checklist items as possible before taxiing. Concentrate on your primary responsibilities. Do not become absorbed in other tasks or conversation while the aircraft is moving.
Cessna 62740, hold short, runway 17 right, landing traffic.
Cessna 740, holding short, runway 17 right for landing traffic.
Read back all clearances involving active runway crossing, hold short, and taxi into position and hold instructions. If you are unsure of your position, ask for assistance. Controlled airports can offer progressive taxi instructions.
Cessna 53549er requests progressive taxi instructions.
Cessna 549er, proceed to the general aviation ramp via Alpha. Caution, construction on ramp near right.
Report deteriorating or confusing airport markings, signs, and lighting to the airport operator or FAA officials. Also report confusing or erroneous airport diagrams and instructions. At busier airports, where there is an increased amount of aircraft, air traffic controllers must make use of the existing airport surface to keep traffic flowing at a maximum efficiency level. Land and hold short operations, also known as LAHASO, are used to help air traffic controllers work with more aircraft at one time, allowing a more efficient use of the runway environment.
Warrior 83312, you are cleared to land. Runway 26, hold short of runway 35.
Specific knowledge-based training must be completed before any pilot can conduct LAHASO. In addition, student pilots conducting solo operations are not authorized to participate in land and hold short operations. The regulations state that pilots shall become familiar with all available information concerning their flight, including runway lengths and takeoff and landing distance for the conditions at the airport of intended use.
Warrior 312, cleared to land runway 26, hold short runway 35.
Acceptance of land and hold short instructions indicates that you fully understand the clearance, including all related procedures.
Cessna 52241, cleared to land runway 35. Hold short Bravo intersection for crossing traffic.
Cessna 241, unable to hold short at Bravo.
The pilot in command has the final authority to accept or decline any land and hold short clearance. The safety and operation of the aircraft remain the responsibility of the pilot. As we have seen, airports play an important role in aviation. In this section, we covered the major items of interest to a VFR pilot. However, each airport has its own unique characteristics. Further sections will introduce you to publications which you can use to better acquaint yourself with unfamiliar airports.
When traveling to a new area in your car, road signs and road maps help you get to your destination. In the same manner, Aeronautical Charts guide you in the air when you leave your local area. The charts you'll be using for navigation represent the Earth's surface, and throughout your training and flying career, you will be required to locate and identify certain positions on the chart. You can do this by using lines of latitude, which are parallel to the Earth's equator, and lines of longitude, which run from the North Pole to the South Pole. Using the equator as a starting point, we can plot lines of latitude north and south from 0 degrees at the equator to 90 degrees at the poles. By international agreement, the starting point, or 0 degrees longitude, runs through Greenwich, England. The 0-degree line is called the prime meridian. All other lines of longitude are plotted in degrees east and west through 180 degrees. Each degree of latitude is divided into 60 equal segments called minutes, and each tick mark represents 1 minute. Degrees of longitude are also marked in the same way. By using these degrees and minutes, you can identify a position anywhere on the chart. For example, if you were located at the Mentone Airport, you could determine its coordinates by first locating the nearest latitude line, which is 41 degrees. Then count the number of minutes up from 41. In this case, it is 9 minutes. Since latitude increases as you go north in the northern hemisphere, you must add the 9 minutes to 41 degrees. You can also do the same for longitude. Since longitude increases as you go west in the United States, you must add about 4 minutes to 86 degrees. Your geographic coordinates are 41 degrees, 9 minutes north latitude, and 86 degrees, 4 minutes west longitude. Notice that the latitude is always given first when stating coordinates. In addition, you can use minutes of latitude to measure distance. Each minute is equal to 1 nautical mile. For example, to measure the distance between Mentone Airport and Fulton County Airport at Rochester, you can use the latitude lines. The distance is 8 nautical miles. You can verify this by using the nautical mile scale on the chart. Make sure you don't measure distances using minutes of longitude, because those distances will vary depending upon their position with respect to the poles. There are many problems associated with trying to portray a spherical object, such as the Earth, in chart form. When we try to flatten any spherical object, distortions occur. Over the years, several charting techniques called projections have been developed to minimize these distortions and inaccuracies. One method is the Lambert conformal conic projection, which makes a sectional cut through the globe. This projection is used for the 3 charts you will use most during your VFR flying. These include the World Aeronautical Chart, the Sectional Chart, and the VFR Terminal Area Chart. Since the scale on a World Aeronautical Chart, or WAC chart, is 1 to 1 million, it covers the most area. A 1 to 1 million scale means that each inch on the chart represents 1 million inches, or approximately 14 nautical miles on the actual surface. The sectional chart is the most widely used chart. It gives you more detail than the WAC chart, since its scale is 1 to 500,000. Therefore, 1 inch on the chart represents about 7 nautical miles. A VFR terminal area chart provides the most detail. Its scale is 1 to 250,000 and covers a selected terminal area. It provides you with a detailed portrayal of the area surrounding a major airport. Since all 3 of these VFR charts provide basically the same information, you can become familiar with them by studying just one. In this case, we'll use a sectional chart. The front panel of each sectional has a chart index, and the shaded block depicts the area that is covered by the chart. Sectionals are named for the major city that lies within the coverage area. For example, this is the Albuquerque sectional. Sectional charts show the locations where terminal area charts can be found by outlining the region with a magenta square. Below the U.S. chart index, you can find information on chart elevation. The color bar gives you a graphic description of elevation changes. The highest terrain elevation on the sectional is printed at the top of the color bar, as well as to the left. Its geographic coordinates are also given. Within each area enclosed by lines of latitude and longitude is a distinct number showing the maximum elevation figure, or MEF, in thousands and hundreds of feet. In this case, the 60 represents 6,000 feet. The MEF is the highest known feature in each quadrangle, including terrain and obstructions. An explanation of the MEF is usually found on or near the front panel. General terrain elevation above sea level can be determined by referring to the contour lines on the chart. These lines connect points of equal terrain elevation. This model shows the relationship between the terrain shape and the contour lines shown on the chart. From a side view, you can see that the lines parallel the base at regular intervals. From a higher angle, notice that the lines follow the irregularities of the slopes, valleys, and cuts of the mountains. A top view of the lines is representative of what you will see on the chart. Intervals between contour lines for a particular chart are shown on the front panel. Now let's look at how to interpret the information on the chart. As you unfold the map, you will notice the legend on the back panel. At the top of each panel are the words north and south, indicating the chart coverage area is divided into north and south regions, with each one displayed on a different side. Now we'll examine some of the more common symbols found on the chart legend. Of primary importance are the airport symbols. A blue symbol indicates an airport with a control tower, while a magenta-colored symbol shows an airport without a tower. Airport symbols are shown in a variety of shapes. Runway diagrams shown inside a colored circle indicate the runways are hard-surfaced and range in length from 1,500 to 8,069 feet. When an airport diagram is not in a colored circle, it indicates that at least one of the hard-surfaced runways is longer than 8,069 feet. Near the airport diagram, you will find the name of the airport and information about its facilities. This is the University of Illinois Willard Airport. The abbreviation after the airport name is its three-letter identifier. CT indicates there is a control tower at the field, and it has a primary frequency of 120.4. The star means that the tower does not operate continuously. The C symbol in the filled-in circle indicates that you should use the tower frequency as the Common Traffic Advisory Frequency, or CTAF, when the tower is not operating. The C symbol is also used to show the CTAF at the airport without a tower. In this example, the CTAF is the Unicom frequency. The RP27 symbol is used to specify a right-hand traffic pattern for runway 27. ATIS, or ATIS, stands for Automatic Terminal Information Service, which is broadcast on a VHF frequency of 124.85. This pre-recorded message will give you vital information on airport conditions. 754 is the elevation of the airport in feet. The L indicates runway lighting, and the star tells you that lighting limitations exist. In this case, you should refer to the Airport Facility Directory for more information. The next number, 81, is the length of the longest runway in hundreds of feet. Here, the longest runway is 8,100 feet. However, the usable length may be less. 122.95 is the Unicom frequency. At airports where a flight service station is located on the field, the letters FSS are included above the airport name. Another vital block of information you will be interested in is the navigational aid. The Nav Aid box contains the name of the facility, frequencies, and the Morse code identifier. The flight service station providing voice communication is sometimes identified below the box. In this case, It's the Roswell FSS. Notice that the VHF radio frequencies are colored blue, while low and medium frequency nav aids are shown in magenta. An underline means that there is no voice communication available on this frequency. A circled H, T, or A in the upper right-hand corner of the information box indicates that specific weather information is available from this nav aid. The H in this case means HIWAS is available. Additional information found on the chart concerns obstructions. Let's take a look at some of the common symbols. One is for obstacles less than 1,000 feet AGL. And another symbol is for obstacles 1,000 feet AGL and above. Printed next to the symbol is the height of the structure above sea level. In parentheses is its height above the ground. If the structure has high intensity lighting, the lighting symbol is included. In addition to towers, which can be identified on the chart, roads and highways make good landmarks for navigation. They are indicated by solid gray lines. Divided highways are shown by double lines. Primary and secondary roads are illustrated by single gray lines. The lines for primary roads are slightly thicker than those for secondary roads. Railroad tracks also make excellent visual aids. Another good reference to use while flying is an industrial plant. Large stacks sometimes produce smoke or steam, which is easily visible from the air. You can often spot the smoke many miles before you actually see the plant. Cities make good checkpoints. Cities and larger towns are shown on sectionals in yellow, which defines the built-up area. Smaller towns, on the other hand, are only represented by a circle on the map. Since you can't identify the towns by their shape, you must use other landmarks to prevent mistaking similar-looking towns, especially those close to each other. Besides highways and railroad tracks, some of these landmarks are racetracks, outdoor theaters, and bridges. Terrain features can also help you identify your location. Reservoirs and lakes are shown by an outline representing the approximate layout of the body of water. A blue line on a chart represents a river. The wider the line, the wider the river. Up to now, you have seen the more identifiable features on the sectional chart. But your chart also has certain airspace information, which you can interpret only by careful study. As you learned earlier, all airspace is divided into two main classifications: uncontrolled and controlled. Uncontrolled, or Class G airspace, usually begins at the Earth's surface and extends upward to the base of the overlying controlled airspace. Class E controlled airspace is identified by tinted bands with the color dissolving into the area of controlled airspace. The height of the floor of this airspace is identified by different colors. A blue tinted band indicates the floor begins at 1,200 feet above the surface. A magenta tinted band indicates the floor starts at 700 feet above the surface. In some areas, the floor of Class E airspace may begin at altitudes other than 700 or 1,200 feet above the ground. These areas are indicated by overlapping blue lines. The floor of Class E airspace is depicted next to the line. In this example, the floor begins at 5,300 feet MSL. At some airports, dashed magenta lines indicate that Class E airspace begins at the surface. Another type of Class E airspace is a federal airway, commonly referred to as a Victor airway. The center line of an airway is marked in blue on sectional charts. Several other types of controlled airspace are also depicted on sectional charts. These include Class D airspace with its lateral limits appearing as blue dashed lines and its vertical limit indicated in hundreds of feet. If Class C airspace is designated at an airport, it will be shown like this. The solid magenta lines indicate the lateral limits of both the inner and outer circles. The extent of the outer area is not depicted on sectional charts. Class C vertical limits are shown in hundreds of feet MSL. The upper limit is printed over the lower limit or floor of the airspace. In this example, Wichita's outer circle has an upper limit of 5,300 feet MSL and a floor of 2,700 feet. The inner circle has the same upper limit, but the floor extends down to the surface. Class B airspace is outlined by solid blue lines, with the upper and lower altitude limits depicted within each sector. Class B airspace is also shown on VFR terminal area charts. The area covered is indicated on sectional charts by a wide blue line. If fixed-wing special VFR operations are prohibited, the term No SVFR will be included directly above the primary airport's information block. Other types of airspace you will find displayed on the chart are prohibited areas, restricted areas, military operations areas, and warning areas. In this discussion, we've talked about the major features of aeronautical charts. To get additional information, you will need to review the manual and the chart legend. Aeronautical charts are the basis for all air navigation. The time spent becoming familiar with them will be well worth your effort. The ability to quickly find chart information reduces your workload in the air, allowing you more time to devote to your flying.
Your airplane gives you the freedom to fly almost anywhere you want to go. With this freedom comes responsibility. The responsibility to know the requirements of the area in which you're operating and to ensure that you and your aircraft are properly equipped and certified to fly in that airspace. The sky over the United States is divided into various airspace categories. The two main categories are controlled and uncontrolled. Special use airspace and other airspace areas are additional categories. First, let's take a look at controlled and uncontrolled airspace. In controlled airspace, all aircraft operators are subject to certain pilot qualifications, equipment requirements, and operating rules which are specified in the regulations. In addition, you may be required to be in contact with Air Traffic Control, or ATC, while flying in controlled airspace. ATC may provide you with services such as traffic advisories, sequencing of aircraft, and radar separation. Radar services are improved by use of a transponder, which is an electronic device aboard the airplane that enhances your aircraft's identity on an ATC radar screen. If your aircraft is equipped with a transponder, regulations require you to use it whenever you fly in controlled airspace. You are also required to have a transponder with Mode C altitude encoding capability anytime you are flying at or above 10,000 feet mean sea level. This, however, excludes the airspace at and below 2,500 feet above ground level. The use of this equipment will be discussed in a later program. Controlled and uncontrolled airspace is classified using alphabetical designations based on the standards set forth by the International Civil Aviation Organization, commonly referred to as ICAO. Controlled airspace consists of those areas designated as Class A. B, C, and E airspace. Uncontrolled airspace is designated as Class G. Currently, there isn't any airspace in the U.S. meeting the ICAO definition for Class F. The classification of airspace is relative to the complexity of the operational requirements placed on the pilot and aircraft. With this in mind, let's take a look at Class A airspace. Class A airspace extends from 18,000 feet MSL up to and including 60,000 feet MSL. To fly in Class A airspace, you must hold an instrument rating, operate under an IFR flight plan, and be controlled directly by ATC. Now let's discuss the classes of airspace that you'll become familiar with while flying under visual flight rules. VFR sectional charts can be used to identify the various classes of airspace you will be flying in. The specific dimensions of most of the airspace classes are depicted on these charts. Class B airspace surrounds our nation's busiest airports. In Class B airspace, radar services are provided by ATC to separate all arriving and departing traffic. Although the shape of Class B airspace may vary to meet the specific needs of each location, the general design is a series of expanding layers. This shape allows arriving and departing airplanes to remain in controlled airspace as they travel between the airport and en route portion of the flight. To operate within Class B airspace, there are specific requirements that must be met. Prior to entering the airspace, you must get an authorization or clearance from ATC. This means your aircraft must be equipped with a two-way radio so you can communicate with ATC. In addition, your aircraft must have a transponder with Mode C altitude encoding capability. The transponder requirement extends out to 30 nautical miles from the primary airport and covers the airspace from the surface up to 10,000 feet MSL. To operate within Class B airspace, you must hold at least a private pilot certificate. There is, however, one exception to this regulation. Student pilots may operate within Class B airspace if they first comply with the training requirements listed in the regulations and have the appropriate instructor endorsement. Keep in mind that some Class B primary airports are so congested that takeoffs and landings by student pilots are prohibited. These airports are listed in FAR Part 91 and in the AIM. Class C airspace exists at designated airports where the volume of traffic is not as great as in Class B airspace. But ATC does provide radar services to all aircraft. This airspace usually consists of a core area or inner circle extending out 5 nautical miles from the primary airport, and a shelf area or outer circle with a 10-mile radius. The core area begins at the surface, while the shelf area starts at 1,200 feet AGL. Both have an upper limit of 4,000 feet above the airport elevation. Prior to entering Class C airspace, you must establish two-way communications with ATC and maintain radio contact while in the airspace. Your aircraft must also be equipped with an operable transponder with Mode C capability. This requirement extends up to 10,000 feet MSL. An outer area exists out to 20 nautical miles from the primary airport in association with Class C airspace. Although two-way radio communications are not required, inbound VFR pilots are strongly encouraged to contact ATC when flying in the 20-mile outer area. ATC normally provides radar services in this area to improve safety and aircraft separation. Another classification you need to know is Class D airspace. Class D airspace is located around airports that have operating control towers. The control tower provides air traffic control and weather reporting services to arriving and departing aircraft in the terminal area. The lateral dimensions of Class D airspace are normally based on the instrument approach procedures at the airport. Since this airspace often contains arrival extensions, the lateral limits vary from airport to airport. Normally, the ceiling of Class D airspace is 2,500 feet above the airport elevation. The ceiling may vary, though, due to requirements unique to each airport. Prior to entering Class D airspace, you must establish and maintain two-way radio communications with the control tower. At airports where the control tower is only operational at certain times, the airspace will be designated as Class D only when the tower is open. When the tower is not in operation, this area is referred to as Class E airspace. If there is no observer on the field to provide weather reporting service, the airspace will be designated as Class G. Two-way radio communications with ATC are not required in either Class E or Class G airspace for VFR flights. However, in those Class E and Class G airspace areas which have an operating control tower, you must communicate with the tower when you are within 4 nautical miles and at or below 2,500 feet AGL. There are also some airports where the instrument arrival extension does not require establishing radio contact with the control tower. In this case, the extension area is designated as Class E airspace. The Class E designation also covers the remaining controlled airspace and consists of several different segments. ATC services are provided to IFR traffic in Class E, and some services are available on request for VFR flights. One segment of Class E airspace is found around non-towered airports which have approved instrument approach procedures. The purpose of this area is to allow IFR traffic to remain in controlled airspace while transitioning from the en route environment to the airport. The base of this type of Class E airspace begins either at the surface or at 700 feet AGL. The lateral limits may vary and are depicted on sectional charts. In both cases, the vertical limit extends upward to the base of the overlying airspace. At airports where Class E airspace begins at the surface, weather reporting services are provided by an FAA-designated weather observer. At certain times, this service may not be available, and the airspace will then be designated as Class G. Away from airports, much of the Class E airspace begins at 1,200 feet AGL, and most of your flights will be conducted in this airspace. Federal Airways, also known as Victor Airways, are designated as Class E airspace. These airways allow you to fly from one location to another by radio navigation. These airways are normally 8 nautical miles wide and begin at 1,200 feet AGL. The low-altitude airway system includes the airspace up to, but not including, 18,000 feet MSL. Unless designated at a lower altitude, Class E airspace also covers the 48 contiguous states, the District of Columbia, and a portion of Alaska, beginning at 14,500 feet MSL and ending at the base of Class A airspace. It does not, however, include the airspace within 1,500 feet of the surface. The last letter designation for U.S. airspace is Class G, or uncontrolled airspace. Essentially, all airspace not designated as Class A, B, C, D, or E is uncontrolled. ATC doesn't have any responsibility or authority for aircraft operations in Class G airspace, and unless the area contains an operating control tower, there are no two-way radio communications or special equipment requirements. Although some segments of airspace we have discussed do not require communication or special equipment, it is still important to know their dimensions because of required weather minimums. Specific cloud clearance and visibility minimums have been established for VFR flights in both controlled and uncontrolled airspace classes. Let's take a look at controlled airspace weather minimums first. To operate VFR in Class B airspace, you must remain clear of clouds and maintain at least 3 statute miles flight visibility. You must also maintain 3 statute miles visibility in Class C and D airspace, but the cloud clearance increases to 500 feet below, 1,000 feet above, and 2,000 feet horizontally. These same minimums apply in Class E airspace below 10,000 feet MSL. In Class E airspace above 10,000 feet MSL, though, the minimums increase. You must maintain 5 statute miles flight visibility and maintain a distance from clouds of 1,000 feet below, 1,000 feet above, and 1 statute mile horizontally. Besides the basic VFR weather minimums, there are additional limitations when operating in the vicinity of an airport in controlled airspace. For example, to operate VFR beneath a ceiling within the lateral boundaries of controlled airspace, which extends to the surface, the ceiling must be at least 1,000 feet. In addition, within the lateral boundaries of the surface areas of Class B, C, D, and E airspace, VFR pilots cannot land, take off, or enter an airport's traffic pattern unless the visibility is 3 statute miles or better. These requirements give VFR and IFR pilots the necessary visibility to see and avoid each other during approaches and departures. When the weather is below these VFR minimums, you may be able to obtain a special VFR clearance from ATC. This type of clearance allows you to take off and land as long as you have 1 mile visibility and can remain clear of clouds. Keep in mind, a special VFR clearance cannot be issued at night unless you have a current instrument rating and your airplane is equipped for instrument flight. In addition, special VFR clearances are not issued to fixed-wing aircraft during the day or night at some of the nation's busier airports. A listing of these airports can be found in FAR Part 91. The lowest weather minimums occur in Class G, uncontrolled airspace, during the day. When flying at or below 1,200 feet AGL, regardless of your MSL altitude, you must maintain a flight visibility of 1 statute mile and remain clear of clouds. During the day, when flying higher than 1,200 feet AGL, but less than 10,000 feet MSL in Class G airspace, the flight visibility remains at 1 statute mile. The cloud clearance increases, though, to 500 feet below, 1,000 feet above, and 2,000 feet horizontally. At night, in Class G airspace, the same cloud clearance minimums apply, but the visibility increases to 3 statute miles below 10,000 feet MSL. These same minimums also apply to any airspace above 10,000 feet, that is within 1,200 feet AGL. There is one exception to these weather minimums in Class G airspace. You may operate an airplane in the traffic pattern at night with a minimum visibility of 1 statute mile. However, you must remain clear of clouds and stay within 1/2 mile of the runway. Finally, if you are operating more than 1,200 feet AGL and you are at or above 10,000 feet MSL in Class G airspace, your weather minimums increase. Here, you are required to maintain 5 statute miles flight visibility and remain 1,000 feet below, 1,000 feet above, and 1 statute mile horizontally from clouds. Airspeed restrictions have also been established for operations in both controlled and uncontrolled airspace. Unless otherwise authorized, you cannot operate an aircraft faster than 250 knots when below 10,000 feet MSL, regardless of the type of airspace. When operating below 2,500 feet AGL and within 4 nautical miles of the primary airport of a Class C or D airspace area, the maximum airspeed decreases to 200 knots. This 200-knot limitation also applies to aircraft operating in the airspace below the lateral limits of Class B airspace and in a VFR corridor designated through such airspace. Another major classification of airspace is called special use. You are required to either avoid these areas or to abide by certain limitations within them. For example, flight within prohibited areas is not allowed because of national security or other national welfare reasons. In contrast, flight within a restricted area is not prohibited, although certain limitations may be imposed due to hazards in the area. To fly through this area, you must receive authorization from the restricted area's controlling agency. Warning areas are over coastal and international waters and cannot be designated as restricted. However, the activities within these areas may be as hazardous as restricted areas. Military operations areas are blocks of airspace in which military training or other military maneuvers are conducted. VFR pilots should exercise extreme caution when flying within an active MOA. An alert area usually contains a high volume of pilot training or an unusual type of aerial activity. Flight within alert areas is not restricted, but you are urged to exercise extreme caution and watch for other traffic. Controlled firing areas contain activities which, if not conducted in a controlled environment, could be hazardous to non-participating aircraft. However, when a non-participating aircraft is spotted approaching the area, all activities are suspended. The final grouping we will look at is designated as other airspace areas. The first type of airspace that falls under this classification is called an airport advisory area. There are 3 different types of advisory service available at select airports. The FSS provides a local airport advisory, or LAA, service to all participating aircraft within a 10 statute mile radius at airports that have a flight service station but don't have an operating control tower. Although your participation is not mandatory, the flight service station gives valuable information about known traffic, wind direction and velocity, the altimeter setting, and the favored runway. Remote Airport Advisory, RAA service is provided within 10 miles of busy general aviation airports that do not have an operating control tower, or FSS, located on the airport. The Airport Facility Directory lists RAA locations and times of operations. The third service available in an advisory area is Remote Airport Information Service, RAIS. This service is used for short-term special events like medium-sized fly-ins to provide pilots with known traffic updates and special instructions. Service notification is given through a NOTAM D. Military training routes are also defined as other airspace. These routes are developed for the purpose of conducting low-altitude, high-speed military training. You should be aware that operations in excess of 250 knots may occur on military training routes below 10,000 feet MSL. You should also be familiar with Terminal Radar Service Areas, or TRSAs. TRSAs have been designated at certain Class D airports to provide radar service for participating VFR aircraft. You are encouraged to contact ATC, but it is not mandatory. The dimensions of TRSAs are depicted on sectional charts. Temporary flight restrictions, or TFRs, also come under the category of other airspace. TFRs are issued by NOTAM when necessary to protect persons or property on the ground or in the air, maintain air safety, or prevent congestion around aerial demonstrations or major sporting events. TFR NOTAMs are typically issued 30 days prior to the event and typically include effective dates, times, and geographic features or coordinates of the restricted airspace. Other types of airspace in this classification are parachute jump aircraft operations and flight limitations or prohibitions. The days of having the sky all to yourself may be gone, but your freedom is not. The different categories of airspace and the regulations that go along with them are designed to make flying safe. By understanding the requirements of each type of airspace, you'll soon realize that you have a great deal of freedom to operate in the national airspace system.